In this update, we've got a lot of moving parts happen over the next 2 weeks with some record high temperatures. But by the time we get into the second week of October, we're talking about a big time cold front and even some snow. So let's highlight the details going forward. Take a look at the setup because we've got a massive ridge in place across the middle of the country with these southwest winds, and southwest winds is the warmest wind. And they're going to pull those 10, 15, 20 degrees below average temperature anomalies all the way up into the Great Lakes and to the western regions. They're going to be experiencing a fairly significant trough where you're going to be kind of completely the opposite of 10 to 15, almost 20 degrees below average. And that's pretty much going to be the same setup over the next 2 weeks. And that's typically a kind of a little bit more calmer setup. We've got a more of a zonal flow happening right now. So we're not expecting much severe weather, at least over the next 5 days. It's a much more calmer weather setup, but things are going to be changing big time as we go into October. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel. And I would love to reach 200,000 subscribers by the end of the month. And you can help me get there by subscribing to the channel and following all my daily content. So let's take a look at the temperatures this afternoon because wow, you can see the ridge, those southwest winds pulling in from Texas all the way into Oklahoma, well above average, widespread 90-degree temperatures, even some hundreds still showing up on the map in the desert southwest. And those temperatures will only expand as we get into the central plains, and those higher temperatures eventually reaching the 80s by the time into portions of Wisconsin and to Michigan in a couple of days from now. So there's going to be a lot of heat to contend with in the days to come. And we're also going to be dealing with a little bit more, like I mentioned, a zonal weather front. So we got that subtropical jet, but there's really not much Pacific moisture to pull. We've got a lot of sinking air draped across this region, a lot of dry air. Dry air is almost next to impossible to wring out any precipitation, but it heats up quickly. It cools at night, but it heats up quickly big time, and that's why it allows those temperatures with all sun to allow those temperatures to soar in the afternoon. So really the jet stream, the polar jet, is well to the north. It's pulling that colder air across the British Columbia and in parts of the Pacific Northwest, but it's just those far extreme areas. And we still have that cold front just draped across Florida where it's just getting those daily rain showers. And yes, far extreme portions of the eastern US, we are seeing some instability right basically along these coastal regions. And that's exactly where you see these precipitation over the next 48 hours. So there's not much happening across the middle of the country. Like I mentioned, you got that trough out here in the far extreme portions of the Pacific Northwest where they are getting some rain showers, at least along the coastal areas. They do have a pocket of instability draped across portions of the Ohio Valley that extends into Kentucky as well as portions of Tennessee. There's that cold front draped across portions of Florida with those daily rain showers. And then along the East Coast, there's a pocket of energy that's highlighted over this region that's still expected to get another 1 to 2 inches of rain over the coming days. So going forward, that ridge is going to be continue to expand and build across the middle of the country. And those 90-degree temperatures will only lift further north into Kansas and to portions of Iowa. That is well above average for late September going into October, folks. This is, I don't need to tell you, that's plenty warm. Even the 80s all the way up extending almost to the Canadian border. So those are going to be some well above average temperatures. And you can see the trough out here. So that's the only coolness in town, but it gets pretty chilly as we extend into that second week of October. And we're going to go over that. So let's highlight how that's actually going to happen. So as we go into October, starting around the first of the month, we still got that trough in place. We got the trough out west. We've got the big ridge draped across the eastern 2/3 of the U.S., really highlighting these areas across the north central U.S. and as well as into the upper Great Lakes. Those temperatures will just soar, 20, 25 degrees above average, well above average for this time of year. But let's take a look at the vertical velocity index and really kind of expand the view and show you where this change is going to come from. It's going to be coming really from Asia. There's a pocket of energy coming off of Asia that's going to be draped across the Pacific. And you see all these deep green here? That is your upward rising motion air. That's pretty significant. You got some darker blue showing up on the map, and that's going to be significant pockets of abundance amount of precipitation. And all that's going to be pushing, migrating a little bit further off into the east, and eventually start to be impacting the western regions of the US. So by the time we head into that second week of October, starting around that October 7th timeframe, we see all that deep green going bye-bye now, and it's more or less, a lot of sinking air, and all that upward rising motion air is now going to be highlighted over the US. So what that's going to do as this pocket of energy gets a little bit closer to the US, that's going to put a ridge across western portions of Alaska. So in the meantime, here's where the pocket of rain is going to be over the next 5 days. So we've got that energy right now with the trough out here in the Pacific Northwest, especially into portions of Northern California, even creeping into portions of Central California with some much needed rain for those regions. And then it's really kind of highlighted over our northern tiers, Idaho, Montana, and there's that pocket of energy that's highlighted over cross portions of the Ohio Valley. Got the stalled front over Florida, and then you have that pocket of energy across portions of the Northeast. Anywhere in between is pretty much high and dry. It's going to be those well above average temperatures and a lot of sinking air. But the big change comes when that pocket of energy comes across the Pacific, and it's going to be building a ridge off the western portions of Alaska. That's going to allow the trough to start building, and the more significant this ridge is, the deeper this trough is going to be able to pull down into the US. And I think that's what's going to happen by the time we make that transition into that October 3rd, 4th, 5th time frame. Because if we take a look back, by the time we head into that Friday, October the 6th, that ridge is really going to be expanding west of Alaska. That's going to pull the trough down. That's going to be pulling those well below average temperatures down in British Columbia, down into the Pacific Northwest. And as this builds, it's likely going to accelerate. And once it does, once it kind of breaks the dam, if you will, it's all systems go, as that coldest air of the season will be plunging southbound, 20-25 degrees below average temperature anomalies draped across portions of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, into the Dakotas here. That will start sneaking into portions of Kansas and eventually start creeping into the portions of the Texas Panhandle. So if you look at the temperatures, by the time we get starting into that second week of October, around that October 7th, time frame, it's a long ways out, about 10 days out, right? So, but we got big changes ahead, and look at the temperatures by the time we get into that time frame. I mean, that's definitely the coldest temperatures of fall, and I would say this is actually even late from what we typically see on a normal year. So going into that second week of October, we would already experience some sort of cold blast like this, but it has been delayed, but it definitely appears it's coming by the time we head into that second week of October. All those temperatures in red, that's your freezing mark. So all those areas into the 20s going into the mountain regions, and that cold air continues to accelerate and push further south, and it's got snow with it too. So you got a pretty good coating of snow, especially across the mountain regions, as this will continue to dive off the northwest flow and continue to pull the coldest anomalies so far this season. And even the GFS is definitely more bullish with this system. For one, it's faster, and two, it's a little bit colder. So if this scenario kind of plays out, it would actually even pull the colder air even into the Texas Panhandle by then, and creeping into portions of North Texas, with a big change from what they've experienced really all summer long. And look at the significant change that could unfold with those below freezing temperatures for the mountain regions, but those 30s for lows start sharing into Nebraska, into Kansas, into the Texas Panhandle. Places like Amarillo could touch into the upper 30s, and places into Oklahoma, we're talking lows in the 40s. That's definitely the coldest air of the season. Even in the North Texas, we could be looking at mid to low 50s by that time frame, as that cold air will continue to press southbound, and eventually this will head into our eastern 2/3 of the US. And like I mentioned, the GFS a little bit more bullish with this system, but that would pull the snow line even further south. Places like into Denver would start getting into the action with the snow line pulling that far south. And as this dives down to the southeastern regions, and there's the pocket of cold air, the initial pocket of cold air coming in from Canada, with those well below average pockets starting around the 5th time frame through the 8th, entering the far extreme portions of the Pacific Northwest, extending those below average temperatures. And that plunge will only extend those temperatures well into our eastern 2/3 by the time we get into that deeper time frame of that second week of October, with those 10, 15, almost 20 degrees below average temperatures, you know, by that time frame. And then look out west, right? So where you're cold right now, and that would be a dramatic flip heading into that second week of October, with the ridge building up from the western Pacific, you know, western Alaska regions. That would dive down into the British Columbia, dive down into our western states, and then that would pull the trough further into the central and eastern 2/3 and pull those colder anomalies along with it. And that would only build and extend through that second week of October, having those below average temperatures, you know, last not just 1 or 2 days, but likely 5, 6, 7 days, as an extended cool down would be likely in place into that second week of October, you know, going forward. So all this will be playing out, and that's going to be altering the jet stream, right? So it's going to be reactivating that southern jet stream as that system will be pulling across. We'll have a lot more energy to tap into. Of course, you've got a lot of heat to contend with between now and then, but by the time we get into that second week of October, highlighting across portions of Oklahoma and say portions of Texas, where they desperately need the precipitation, looks like they'll finally have some rain chances coming back with into the picture, along with the much cooler air. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely check out my winter forecast after this video, and catch me next update, where I protect you before and after the storm.